Good evening. I'd like to call to order the May 16th, 2023 Little Rock City Board of Directors meeting. We'd like to welcome those in attendance as well as those watching at home or streaming online. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Director Miller.
Here.
Director Richardson.
Here.
Director Peck.
Here.
Director Hines.
Present.
Director Lewis.
Here.
Director Wyrick.
Present.
Director Compuris. Director Phillips.
Present.
Director Adcock.
Present.
Vice Mayor Webb.
Here.
Mayor Scott.
I'd like to recognize Director Lance Hines, who will give our invocation.
Please bow your heads. Dear Lord, we come here tonight to take care of the business of the city of Little Rock for her residents and her workers. Please ask you to continue to watch over our city and Arkansas for the folks who are impacted by the tornado damage at the end of March. It continues to be a process which we're all going through. Please let their belongings be secure. Let them work out good outcomes with their insurance, with our federal government, that they all may be restored and to a whole to heal those neighborhoods. Please let us seek your guidance tonight as we do the people's business, that we always look for your divine guidance as we legislate. In your son's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Will you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We would like to start the meeting with a presentation. We have an employee retirement, City Manager Moore, and I get John Honeywell, Director of Public Works, as we would like to recognize our longtime employee, Mike Hood.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Mike is a person that's very interesting. He is really a history buff. He can tell you just about anything about Little Rock, and it's been just my pleasure to know him over the years. I've never seen him so dressed up, so that's good, Mike. But it is an honor to recognize his years of service, and at this time I'd like for John to come up and say a few words, and then we'll hear from Mike.
Thank you, Bruce. First off, Mike was a longtime employee of the city of Little Rock. He was employed with us for 24 years. His career in engineering spanned a little over 40 years, so he was a very well-rounded engineer for us and for many other agencies around the state and around the country. He started out here in Arkansas with the Department of Environmental Quality, doing work in their solid waste and wastewater divisions, if I'm remembering correctly. Mike grew up in Iowa, went to school at Iowa State, got his engineering degree from there. He's been married to his wife Charlotte for 38 years. They have a son, James, who's in the engineering field as well, working with one of our local engineering firms currently. He worked for us as our solid waste engineer, our environmental compliance engineer, and finished his career as our civil engineering manager. He was the one that was overseeing all of our public projects that we've done through the bond and sales tax. That was Mike's, I think, biggest accomplishment with us, was overseeing that program and making it successful. Throughout his career, he was responsible for a little over $500 million in infrastructure capital improvement projects, not only with the city, but with other agencies that he worked with. We really miss Mike. He was in our administrative office. He was sort of the social coordinator, instigator of a lot of things. When everybody, we hadn't done anything in a while, next thing you know, we're having a cookout, or we're having a potluck lunch, organizing Christmas party, organizing Halloween, organizing basically any holiday we had. Mike was the one that made sure we were doing something, getting everybody together to have a good time. I will list off some of the things Mike has been doing since he retired actually in April. He's been absent from us for a few months. he kept coming around for a little while, but now he's finally cut the strings and has let us go. But so we're working on making up for his loss. But his hobbies include, and like Bruce mentioned, huge historian. Anything you want to know about Central Arkansas, he is the source. We still go to him when we need to find out about certain things. But his hobbies, and I'm going to read these because he's got quite a few. He carpentry, grew up doing that with both his father and his grandfather. He loves old John Deere tractors. I think you have a number of them at your place. 4. Camping, boating, fishing, gardening, eating, and then having big parties out at their place in Ferndale that they've lived in for close to 30-something years as well. So family and friends, there's always something going on there. So we really miss Mike. We congratulate him on his retirement and wish him nothing but the best. Thank you, Mike.
Mike, on behalf of the city of Little Rock, thank you for your years of service. Thank you for your charm and your humor. But most of all, as John mentioned, the work you did with the bond issue, the citizens of Little Rock are grateful. The board is grateful. So again, thank you.
Thank you, everybody. It's been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed knowing each and every one of you. I don't think there's anybody in this room I haven't worked with personally at some point or another, and I did truly enjoy it. And as a closing remark, I'd say be kind to the engineers and the staff that they work with. They do try hard for you, and they do work hard, and you don't pay them enough. You know, for every little thing you hear about, there's hundreds of more things that we successfully have already dealt with and satisfied and taken care of for you. And keep those infrastructure dollars going. The city is beautiful and it needs to keep it that way. There's a lot of needs out there that we need to address over time. I'm glad I got to do so many of them for you, and I bet you'll do lots of wonderful things in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you all, and thank you, Mike, and that was some good advice for all of us. So we have 3 modifications for tonight's agenda. M1, a purchase of land at the Little Rock Port. M2, authorization of a settlement of litigation. And item 27 is a deferral until June 20th, 2023 at staff's request. Do I have a motion to add M1 and M2 to the consent agenda and to defer item 27 until June 20th?
So move.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to add items M1 and M2 to the consent agenda and to defer item 27 until June 20th, 2023. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it. Madam Clerk, if you would, please read the consent agenda along with items M1 and M2.
Consent agenda consists of a motion to approve the May 2nd, 2023 minutes of the Little Rock City Board of Directors meeting, a resolution authorize a contract with Gene Summers Construction Incorporated in amount not to exceed $1,407,806.40 for the Chico Road Improvement Project from Royal Oaks Drive to Yarberry Lane and for the purposes funding from the 3/8 capital improvement sales tax and the limited tax general obligation capital improvement bonds. A resolution authorize a contract with Crafton Toll and Associates Incorporated in amount not to exceed $255,270 for the design of the Southwest Trail Interchange Project and for the purposes. A resolution authorized the city manager to extend a contract with Hope Lawn Care in an amount not to exceed $118,143.94 for right-of-way mowing and trimming Phase 1 within the city of Little Rock, Arkansas, and for the purposes. A resolution to authorize the city manager to extend a contract with Hope Lawn Care in an amount not to exceed $78,453.94 for right-of-way mowing and trimming Phase 2 within the city of Little Rock, Arkansas, and for the purposes. A resolution authorizes the city manager to extend a contract with Hope Lawn Care in an amount not to exceed $835.34 for right-of-way mowing and trimming Phase 3 within the city of Little Rock, Arkansas, and for the purposes, a resolution authorizes the city manager to enter into a contract with Harris Construction Management in an amount not to exceed $322,740 for sidewalk construction within the city of Little Rock, Arkansas, and for the purposes, funding the 3/8 capital improvement sales tax. A resolution to identify expenditures citywide for capital projects funded from the proceeds of the 2022 capital improvement bonds for Parks and Recreation and the Little Rock Zoo. And for the purposes, a resolution authorizes the city manager to enter into a contract with Musco Sports Lighting LLC an amount not to exceed $619,500 for new tennis facility sports lights at Rebsamen Tennis Center. And for the purposes, a resolution authorizes the city manager to enter into a contract with Ecological Design Group Incorporated an amount not to exceed $83,950 for design services for improvements to the East Little Rock Community Center and for other purposes, funding from the American Rescue Plan Act. A resolution to authorize the city manager to enter into a contract with Cromwell Architects Engineers in amount not to exceed $127,500 for design services for improvements to the Southwest Community Center and for other purposes, funding from the American Rescue Plan Act. A resolution authorizes the city manager to enter into a contract with Polk Stanley Wilcox Architects an amount not to exceed $196,730 for design services for the senior center at the center at University Park and for the purposes, funding from the American Rescue Plan Act. A resolution authorizes the city manager to enter into a contract with Cromwell Architects Engineers an amount not to exceed $127,500 for design services for improvements to the Dunbar Community Center and for the purposes, funding from the American Rescue Plan Act. A resolution authorizes the city manager to submit the approved 2023 annual action plan for CDBG home and HOPWA entitlement funds to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development and to execute the agreements with the approved applicants and for other purposes. A resolution to transfer the title of properties located at 3401 West 17th Street and 3403 West 17th Street from the city of Little Rock, Arkansas to Greenlaw Maintenance LLC to be used for neighborhood revitalization programs and for other purposes. A resolution to set June 20th, 2023 as the date of public hearing to amend ordinance number 19,531 of May the 2nd, 2006 to annex lots 57A, 57B, and 57C of Block 2 Taylor Park Subdivision Phase 3, in addition to the city of Little Rock, Arkansas, into Improvement District number 27, and for the purposes, a resolution to reappoint Yogesh Sundai and Jim Keep to the Advertising and Promotion Commission, and for the purposes, a resolution to make appointments to the Arkansas Municipal of Fine Arts Board of Trustees, and for the purposes, a resolution authorized the mayor to enter into a contract with Zandaya Zarita for the purchase of approximately 2 acres of land and one manufactured home for use by the Little Rock Port Authority for economic prospect recruitment and for other purposes. A resolution authorizes the settlement of litigation after court annex mediation in amount not to exceed $175,000 and for the purposes. That concludes the consent agenda.
Move for the adoption of the consent agenda.
Second.
Seeing no questions, there's a motion and a second to adopt the consent agenda. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The consent agenda is passed. Madam Clerk, if you would, please read the grouped items.
An ordinance to accept the Pinewood land annexation to add certain lands to the city of Little Rock, Arkansas, and for the purposes, an ordinance to approve a planned zoning development, establish a planned commercial development titled Tract 404 Chenal Valley PCD, located at the northeast corner of Highway 10 and Morgan Cemetery Road, Little Rock, Arkansas, amending the official zoning map of the city of Little Rock, Arkansas, and for the purposes, an ordinance to amend Little Rock, Arkansas Revised Code, Chapter 34, Section 34-101 to 34-141, the Transportation Code, to declare an emergency and, for the purposes, an ordinance to dispense with the requirement of competitive selection and to authorize the city manager to enter into a contract with Clifford Powered Systems in the total amount of $50,000 plus applicable taxes and fees for the purchase of OmniMetrics generator monitoring services and, for the purposes, an ordinance to dispense with the requirement of competitive selection and to authorize the city manager to renew a contract with N4 US Incorporated, an amount not to exceed exceed $288,385.72 plus applicable taxes and fees for software maintenance for the city's enterprise resource planning system to declare an emergency and for the purposes. An ordinance to condemn certain structures in the city of Little Rock, Arkansas with structural fire and health hazards, to provide for summary abatement procedures, direct city staff to take such action as necessary to raise and remove said structures, to declare an emergency, and for other purposes. First reading.
We suspend the rules and place on second reading.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to suspend the rules and move the ordinances to second reading. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion passes. Madam Clerk, second reading, please.
An ordinance to accept the Pinewood land annexation to add certain lands to the city of Little Rock, Arkansas. An ordinance to approve a planned zoning development, establish a planned commercial development titled Tract 404 Chenal Valley PCD, located at the northeast corner of Highway 10 and Morgan Cemetery Road. An ordinance to amend Little Rock, Arkansas Revised Code Chapter 34, Section 34-101 to 34-141 of the Transportation Code to declare an emergency. An ordinance to dispense with the requirement of competitive selection and to authorize the city manager to enter into a contract with Clifford Power Systems in the total amount of $50,000 plus applicable taxes and fees for the purchase of OmniMetrics generator motor monitoring services. An ordinance to dispense with the requirement of competitive selection and to authorize the city manager to renew a contract with N4 US Incorporated in amount not to exceed $288,385.72 plus applicable taxes and fees for software maintenance for the city's enterprise resource planning system to declare an emergency. An ordinance to condemn certain structures in the city of Little Rock, Arkansas with structural fire and health hazards, to provide for summary abatement procedures, to direct city staff to take such action as is necessary to raise and remove said structures, to declare an emergency. Second reading.
Vice Mayor, before I make the motion to go to third reading, I would like to request that we show the pictures on item number 24.
Thank you. Director.
And I move we suspend the rules and place on third and final reading.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to suspend the rules and move the ordinances to third reading. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Madam Clerk, third reading, please.
An ordinance to accept the Pinewood land annexation to add certain lands to the city of Little Rock, Arkansas. An ordinance to approve a planned zoning development, establish a planned commercial development titled Tract 404 Chenal Valley PCD, located at the northeast corner of Highway 10 and Morgan Cemetery Road. An ordinance to amend Little Rock, Arkansas Revised Code Chapter 34, Section 34-101 to 34-141 Transportation Code to declare an emergency. An ordinance to dispense with the requirement of competitive selection and to authorize the city manager to enter into a contract with Clifford Power Systems in the total amount of $50,000 plus applicable taxes and fees for the purchase of OmniMetrics generator monitoring services. An ordinance to dispense with the requirement of competitive selection and to authorize the city manager to renew a contract with N4 USA Incorporated in an amount not to exceed $288,385.72 plus applicable taxes and fees for software maintenance for the city's enterprise resource planning system to declare an emergency. An ordinance to condemn certain structures in the city of Little Rock, Arkansas with structural fire and health hazards, to provide for summary abatement procedures, to direct city staff to take such action as is necessary to raise and remove said structures, to declare an emergency. Third and final reading.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We've had three readings of the ordinance. Director Adcock, we have the pictures, and see Director Wyrick, you have a question?
Yes. Are you do you have cards on any of these?
No.
You don't have a card on item 16?
Item 16 was on the consent agenda.
Okay. But
And I had a card, but the request was only if there were questions or issues.
Okay. Well, I understood there were cards, so I didn't know when that came in. So,
We don't have any cards until we get to item 28.
but I think there's people that want to speak on it. They didn't turn item 16.
This is the one.
Item 16 was on the consent agenda, and I was told that, and they were for the item. The only cards I got were for the item, and if there were any issues, they would like to speak, but if there were no issues, they did not care to speak. I did not have any cards against the item.
And 16 is just setting the public hearing.
I know it is, but I was just made aware that they turned in cards to speak, so I'm just trying to understand what happened there.
That's what happened.
Where did,
I think they want to speak, though. I apologize.
Tom, can we backtrack since we've already passed this? I mean, are we,
And we've already passed the,
we
Once
setting
you've
the-
had the vote discussion.
we've already passed it, and the card says available to answer questions if there were questions. And as I stated, there were no questions. The board had no questions. We've already passed the item.
Well, we have two gentlemen here that turned in cards to speak on it, so I just, right before
Vice Mayor.
my hand is when
only
I,
one card turned in, and that's.
City Manager Moore?
Yeah, I think that maybe they might not understand, but item 16 is just setting the date for a public hearing on June 20th. So the board will discuss the item on June 13th, but then the hearing which you would speak at is on June 20th. This is just setting the date. This is no action. It's just saying this is, we have, by law, we have to set the date. The board has to, so.
We're available if there were questions.
Okay.
Thank you for the clarification, Mr. Moore. Do you have any questions on the grouped items? And Director Adcock, did you have any questions on the items for item 24? The condemnation items?
I believe the question last week was where the pictures, and I think Ashley sent the pictures to the board during the meeting, so.
We've had 3 readings. Seeing no more questions, all those in favor of the passage of the ordinances indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The items pass. All those in favor of passage of the emergency clause for item 21, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The emergency clause passes. All those in favor of the passage of the emergency clause for item 23, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The emergency clause passes. All those in favor of the passage of the emergency clause for item 24, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The emergency clause passes. Madam Clerk, if you would, please read item 25.
An ordinance to approve a plan zoning development and establish a plan development commercial titled El Cristal Event Center PDC located at 7314 Geyer Springs Road, Little Rock, Arkansas, amending the official zoning map of the city of Little Rock, Arkansas, and for the purposes first reading.
We suspend the rules and place on second reading.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to suspend the rules and move the ordinance to second reading. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Madam Clerk, second reading, please.
An ordinance to approve a plan zoning development and to establish a plan development commercial titled El Cristal Event Center PDC located at 7314 Geyer Springs Road, second reading.
We suspend the rules and place on third and final reading.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to suspend the rules and move the ordinance to third reading. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Madam Clerk, third reading, please.
An ordinance to approve a plan zoning development, establish a plan development commercial titled El Cristal Event Center PDC located at 73 Geyer Springs Road, third and final reading.
We've had 3 readings of the ordinance. Board members, are there any questions? Director Adcock?
Yes, this is the third special event center within 2 weeks, two blocks of each other. This person came before Southwest Ups. They was not for sure when they was asked about serving liquor. They said no. When they was asked about security, they said yes. But then when they was questioned, they thought the question was they personally going to serve the liquor? And they said, well, that if anybody brought liquor, they could drink it. When it came to security, she said the persons renting the facility would have to decide if they wanted security. I think that we're having lots of misunderstanding, particularly when we have a language difference and we don't explain to people exactly what we think is, are you going to serve liquor? They think we're talking about them personally going to serve it. So I'll be voting no on this because it is too close to two other ones. We have the Oasis Club that is still within 2 blocks of this, and that puts 4 right there on that one corner that is a very busy intersection. And I really think that we need to spend more time making sure that people understand exactly what a special event center is. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Adcock. Are there any more questions? Any more questions?
Did we have any opposition? I noticed it passed unanimously at the Planning Commission level. And while I'm not a big proponent of event centers, I think it's unfair to judge this proposed event center. The fact that we've had two other event centers that have been identified by Director Adcock, and I'm not sure I've heard of any problems with those, and this is in Ward 2. And I think that the language barrier, I understand that issue, but I think that it's pretty much clear to a lot of our constituents that in order to sell alcohol, you have to go through the ABC, which in fact has to come back to us for approval. So I'm not sure, Joan, I share your sentiment with respect to approval or disapproval with this particular item. I don't say it's going to be problematic. It is in Ward 2. And I'm not a big proponent of event centers. I am a proponent of us having opportunities for people to congregate and not be out on the streets canvassing, caravanning, or doing a host of other things that they could be doing had they not had a place to congregate and socialize. So I will be supporting this.
Are there any additional questions from members of the board? Any additional questions? We've had 3 readings. We've answered the questions. All those in favor of passage of the ordinance, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
The ordinance passes. Okay, item 27 is deferred.
Item 26.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Madam Clerk, would you please read item 26?
An ordinance to reclassify property located in the city of Little Rock, Arkansas, amending the official zoning map of the city of Little Rock, Arkansas, and for other purposes. First reading.
We suspend the rules and place on second reading.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to suspend the rules and move the ordinance to second reading. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Madam Clerk, second reading, please.
An ordinance to reclassify property located in the city of Little Rock, Arkansas. Second reading.
We suspend the rules and place on third and final reading.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to suspend the rules and move the ordinance third reading. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the motion passes. Madam Clerk, third reading, please.
An ordinance to reclassify property located in the city of Little Rock, Arkansas. Third and final reading.
We've had 3 readings of the ordinance. Board members, are there any questions? Director Wyrick.
Thank you. I had trouble finding my button. I'm sorry. Do you have any cards on this one?
28. I don't have any cards.
No cards? Okay. I spoke to the person that lives right next door to this property, and I thought maybe he would be here tonight. But there were a number of objectors at the Planning Commission, and this is in the outskirts of our city in the extraterritorial boundary, and it's a mobile home going in, but there are really a lot of nice, fine homes that are in and around this location. So I know when the Planning Commission sends these to us, they search the area, and there are some mobile homes in the area, but there are a lot of nice homes that's starting to get built up to a nice area. So I would just simply object to the fact that it's not in keeping with the direction that that area is going.
Thank you, Director Wyrick. Any additional questions from the board? The ordinance has been read 3 times. No additional questions. All those in favor of passage indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
Nay.
The noes have it. I will open the public hearing for item 28. Madam Clerk, would you please read the item?
An ordinance to approve a plan zoning development, establish a plan office development titled Hamilton Station POD, located north of 14,800 Cantrell Road, Little Rock, Arkansas, amending the official zoning map of the city of Little Rock, Arkansas, and for the purposes, first reading.
We suspend the rules and place on second reading.
There's a motion, a second, to suspend the rules and move the ordinance to second reading. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Madam Clerk, second reading, please.
An ordinance to approve a plan zoning development, establish a planned office development titled Hamilton Station POD, located north of 14,800 Cantrell Road, second reading.
We suspend the rules and place on third and final reading.
There's a motion, a second, to suspend the rules and move the ordinance to third reading. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Madam Clerk, third reading, please.
An ordinance to approve a plan zoning development and to establish a plan office development titled Hamilton Station POD, located north of 14,800 Cantrell Road, third and final reading.
Thank you. Mr. Collins? Actually, Mr. Collins, I have cards on this, and I believe you indicated that the applicant who filled out a card, but I'm not sure which of these cards is the applicant.
Okay.
Could you
yes.
explain to the board what we're getting ready to do?
Yes, ma'am. What this is since this item was denied at the Planning Commission, that has been heard at a public hearing, this afternoon I received an email from the applicant that was limiting the uses, restricting some of the uses that was presented at the Planning Commission, and it was primarily in the 03 General Office District uses and some other stipulations prior to that, and that was emailed to me. I believe a copy has been presented to the city clerk's office, but then also discussion with the city attorney's office. These changes in this would be a changed application. It has to be offered by the applicant and concurred with and read into the ordinance for that. So I would just suggest that the applicant come forward, talk about the items that they've talked with the neighborhood. That would also change our opposition to the application. We had 2 oppositions why we could not support it. One of them was the number of uses, and they needed to work that out with the neighborhood association on that. And the second one was in the Planning Commission, we did not have an amended traffic study supporting the uses that was presented. Since then, we have received a traffic study, and we have reviewed that, and it has not, will not impact the intersection. And the applicant can also talk about that traffic study. So at this time, if the application is amended, we would be supportive of the application. That would be our change and our recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Mr. Griffin?
Yes, Jess Griffin, the applicant's representative, and we've come to an agreement with the neighborhood after several rounds of emails about the building height. We restricted the building height, and we nailed down the times that were acceptable to the neighborhood for deliveries, dumpster pickup, office hours, et cetera. We have limited the uses, and then we've also agreed to put the evergreen trees that would be above the wall on the neighborhood side of a fence. We're going to put an 8-foot fence at the top of the wall, and they want to see the trees on their side of the wall and not on our side of the wall, and we agreed to do that also. These are the revisions, and I think we have sent a copy out to everybody, and I'm happy to answer any questions y'all have.
Director Peck, is your question for the applicant?
Yes, well, it's in general. But Jess, thank you, and to John Reese and to the neighbors.
I need to get a point.
I'm sorry.
The applicant is requesting these changes because they are more restrictive than what was before the Planning Commission. Is that correct?
Yes, this is correct.
And you're doing this voluntarily?
Yes, we're doing it voluntarily.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. Director Peck?
Thank you. I just want to thank you and John and your team and the Brunans and the other neighbors for working together to come to an agreement. I know it's been a long process, but congratulations to everybody. It's going to be a good development. The neighbors are happy, so I'm happy.
Thank you, Director Peck. Thank you, Mr. Griffin. Director Wyrick, do you still have your hand up, or is this from last time?
No, I took it down. I was curious to know if this would need to go back to the Planning Commission or not, because their vote was 4 ayes and 7 nays, so they objected this application, but I'm not sure that what changed really would require, based on what I'm hearing, it would really require action from the Planning Commission again.
Director Warwick, I spoke with Mr. Collins this evening. It was his indication that the objection from the Planning Commission was because of the objection from the neighborhood. So the addition of these conditions, which need to be made and amended to be made a section of the ordinance, would overcome the neighborhood objection and therefore the planning department's objection. Even so, y'all have the right to send it back to the Planning Commission if you wish to do so. You have the right to take action tonight if you wish to do so.
I know we do, but I wouldn't want to do it if it was not substantial enough that it required their review of it again. And to me, what I heard, it doesn't sound like it's substantial enough to require their review. So that's why I took my hand down. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Wyrick and Mr. Carpenter. I do have a card from someone who initially indicated that they were opposed to it. I want to call on the person, and it's my understanding now they've agreed, but I want to give the person an opportunity to say that. Carrie Brunin?
Yes, hello. I was just, I pulled a card in opposition just to make sure those changes were heard. And now that they have been, I withdraw my opposition.
Thank you. I have one additional card in against Bill Lessenberry. Bill Lessenberry. Are there any additional questions from the board? We'll close the public hearing.
Motion to approve.
Director
the ordinance.
Adcock?
Yes.
I don't see, okay.
What time was all of this done this afternoon? I have a real problem. I've had lots of phone calls on this, and I have assured the people that I was going to vote no. And when they come in here at the last minute and they've changed all this does not give the neighborhood people time to understand what the changes are and everything. And so I will be voting no on this, and I would like to suggest that people who change their minds change it early enough that we can notify the neighborhood people to make sure that they are okay with it. Thank you.
I'm going to call on Director Peck to clarify.
Joan, I think you might be getting this confused with another project on Cantrell and Rummel. This is actually by Pinnacle Valley. And Mr. Reese has worked with that neighborhood. I've been to that neighborhood several times. I've met with the Brunens, and they are the ones in opposition, but they have come to an agreement with Mr. Reese. And there is another one just 2 miles away from there. I think you might be referring to that one.
Thank you, Director Adcock and Director Peck. Because we had additional questions, I will again close the public hearing.
Need an amendment.
And we will vote on, we've had 3 readings of the ordinance as amended. Is that correct, Mr. Moore?
No, I think when it was read, it wasn't, the applicant hadn't made the voluntary amendment, so I think you got to vote on the amendment first, and then if that passes, vote on the ordinance as amended.
Motion to approve the amendments proffered by the applicant.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve the amendments proffered by the applicant. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
The motion passes. The amendments have been adopted. So now we will be voting on the passage of the ordinance as amended. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
The ordinance passes. Thank you. We'll now call on Assistant City Manager Emily Cox to provide an update on ARPA.
Thank you. Good evening. So I'd like to provide an update on where we are on spending for projects that the board has approved as part of the resolutions of intent on how the city will spend ARPA funds. And the first thing I'd like to do, though, is refresh everyone on the eligible expense categories. They're all the same that we have discussed in the past, except that very last one. So the categories are expenditure of lost revenue on governmental services, public health measures to respond to COVID, water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure, programs to address negative economic impacts of COVID, premium pay, indirect costs, and then the new one is Congress passed a law in December of 2022 stating that ARPA funds can be spent on disasters such as the EF3 tornado of March 31st, 2023. And on the next slide, you'll see a reminder of the timelines. Costs can be incurred as early as March 3rd of 21. Costs have to be obligated by the end of 2024. And I'm sorry about the font size on that last box, but projects must be completed and paid for by December 31 of 26. And then this is just a reminder that the city received our first tranche of $18.8 million in May of 21. And then the board passed subsequent resolutions in August of 21 and then May of 22 for how to spend those funds. And then in May of 22, we received our second tranche, and the board passed resolutions on how to spend that second tranche in September of 22 and also on December 20th of 2022. And then on the next slide, I want to walk you through each project that you have expressed intent to fund with ARPA funds to tell you where we are in the process on each of those. And the list of projects is, it's in order chronologically when you passed the resolutions. So the very first resolution of intent is represented by this first slide. And so the first thing is the IT upgrades to cybersecurity and IT infrastructure. And all of that, $3.4 million is spent or obligated, and IT expects to have spent that last $548,000 that's obligated by the end of this calendar year. On the fire apparatus, we have received a fire truck, which represents that we've spent that $1.4 million on the fire apparatus. And we have another $839,000 that's obligated, and we're waiting on a pumper to arrive to be able to pay for that, and we expect to receive that by the end of this calendar year. And then the next two lines are for community violence intervention programs, and the board passed a statement of intent for $1.5 million, and that was split with across, for the first $1.2 million of that, it's 10 community violence intervention programs that the board approved, and those programs are ongoing, and we expect those funds to be expended by the end of this year as well. And then $212,000 were set aside for social workers at the Little Rock Police Department. And those, and 2 social workers at the police department were previously part-time, and now they're full-time. So those funds that are obligated will be spent more quickly, since those folks have just gone to full-time positions. And then on the COVID mitigation and prevention line, there's $300,000 that has been set aside for that, and we have spent $237,000, and we have on hand, you'll remember we mostly did vaccine clinics and gave out Visa gift cards, $50 for getting a COVID vaccine. And so we actually still have approximately $30,000 of Visa gift cards on hand that we would like to repurpose for disaster relief, if that's something the board is amenable to. But the money has been spent, and we do have the Visa gift cards, but the incentive isn't really there for the COVID vaccine anymore. And then also on this amount that's obligated on that same line, the $62,818, that we could spend that on additional Visa gift cards, but we don't have, you know, the initial reason is no longer there. So we'd like to propose that we repurpose this $62,000 for the FEMA match. You know, we have to match our funds from our expenditures from the tornado. 25% is our match requirement. So we'd propose to take that $62,000 and put it towards the FEMA match. And then the next line is the one-time pay for eligible city employees. We did that early on, so that is completed. And then you'll also see this last one, the federal law allowed for indirect costs of up to 10%. And so when we did that very first resolution of intent, we set aside 5.5% for indirect costs. Not really, you know, it was just kind of a good estimate that we had for indirect cost. And so you can see we've only spent about $273,000 of that $605,000. So we'd like to pair $107,000 of that with that $62,000 to help towards a FEMA match. So there are 3 separate lines in here that'll add up to $500,000 towards our FEMA match. So the first one is that $62,000 that's obligated on the COVID mitigation. And then on indirect costs, it's not, the exact number's not on your page, but it's about $107,000. Then on the next.
Just for clarity, those proposals that you mentioned that will come to us in the form of a
resolution
at some point soon?
Yes.
At your next agenda meeting.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you. And then on the next slide, so then this is another resolution that was passed with the statement of intent for how to spend funds. So the software and IT upgrades for purchasing and planning, I understand that we intend to have that all spent by the end of this calendar year. Installing broadband at East Little Rock Community Center and hotspots at various parks. This is very much on the minds of our IT and Parks Department, and I know tonight y'all just passed several items related to design services, so we've kind of been waiting on this one, so that's why there's no movement there. And then on the equipment for use at public meetings, those funds are all spent or obligated, and with the work on the boardroom back at City Hall, that should all be spent pretty quickly as well. On the drainage projects, you'll see that not that much has actually gone out the door. And that's because a couple of these are, we have permitting requests pending at the Corps of Engineers. So it's just taking longer than if we were just going to go do the work. And Public Works assures me that they believe we'll still meet the deadlines for ARPA. And if we don't, they'll let me know sooner rather than later, so that we don't miss out on any of that money. And then on the infrastructure to support future affordable housing sites, let's see, I got to turn the page here for myself. Those are on Zion Street, and on May 2nd, the board approved a contract to design the second part. So those funds should be going out this year as well. And then on the investments to affordable housing and efforts to decrease homelessness, we have purchased the property for the microhome village. And so the microhome village construction will be part of the $1.5 million spend. And we also have a bid that's closed for homeless outreach services. A contract should come before the board in the next couple of board meetings on that. So those dollars will be getting out soon too. And then on this next line, the indirect costs of $329,000, that was again 5.5% of that resolution that y'all passed. And we are going to suggest that that full amount go towards our FEMA match. So that's how we get up to the $500,000 for the FEMA match. And then on the next slide, the sidewalks, $200,000 for sidewalks in wards 1, 2, 6, or 7, or a small portion of Ward 3. Public Works is going to provide a list of suggestions based on what we were able to fund in the bond projects and what was not able to be funded. So we look forward to getting recommendations on that in short order. On the recreational facilities, a bid went out, and the Thrasher Boys and Girls Club was awarded, and we're just waiting on, I believe, an agreement to get signed to be able to expend those funds, but that's definitely moving and in the works. Same thing with the parks. They have spent the majority of the funding, and additional projects will come before the board as they're determined. The congregate housing was the World Services for the Blind facility, and that money has gone out the door. And then on the fire facility improvements, that $1.5 million, I understand there's a bid for painting and other projects at fire stations across the city. So, and the fire department is well aware of the deadlines. So that'll be moving. You passed tonight the design work for the senior center and several community centers, so we should see expenditure of some of those funds quickly as well. And then on the next slide, there were some public works capital needs out at the landfill, and I know one of I believe it's a tub grinder that's been ordered, and there are several other things, and that's also all in the works to get that money spent. On the downtown master plan, a vendor, the bid for to do the master plan work has closed, and the selection committee has made a decision on the top bid proposal. And so I think, and then by June, Jamie said that he'll be bringing forward a contract for consideration by the board. On the real-time crime center, several things have come before the board for that, and a lot of it is IT related, and those are services, and so that money actually will need to be spent by the end of 2024, which Major Tyrell is very well aware of, and then after that, to continue funding them, those will be things that will need to be considered in the city budget in 2025 and beyond. On the food desert, I know that the task force has been meeting and has several ideas, so I expect that those projects will get moving as they're finalized. And then on the Little Rock Fire Department capital needs, the new West Little Rock Station and Bay at Station 16, those are still in the planning stages. And then IT upgrades to cybersecurity and IT infrastructure for $200,000. that should all be spent this year as well. And then on the drainage projects as targeted community development, Public Works is going to provide us a list of recommended projects based on what was not funded from the bonds. And then on the last slide, these three things were all passed in December, and so you don't see any obligations or expenditures yet. I do know on the capital improvements at the Museum of Discovery, our consultant for the Rescue Plan Act has helped Kelly Bass work on bid documents and figuring out exactly what's eligible. And I understand also on junior deputy, there's some homework that we've got to get done on the existing lease before we can move forward with helping them work through their capital improvements. So that concludes what I wanted to talk about. And the next slide is just a summary of all the proposed changes that I mentioned with the COVID mitigation, changing that to disaster release and the FEMA match, and then also the indirect costs going towards the FEMA match. So I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Manager Cox. And we've got a couple of questions. Director Campuros?
Emily, thank you. You understand the law. I kept hearing that one of the ways they're trying to elevate the debt ceiling or fix the debt ceiling is clawback of these funds. Are we in any danger of losing anything that we've passed because we've not implemented everything?
We're watching that too, and if it came down to it, we could come back to the board. And Mr. City Manager, did you want to talk about that with the debt ceiling?
Yes, Vice Mayor and members of the board, we are following that very closely. And obviously we have federal lobbyists that are watching that for us too. And I feel very confident that if that were to happen, I would ask the board to move quickly, have a sort of a plan that would sort of protect our funding.
But we do have a plan.
We do.
Yes.
Okay.
Director Miller, thank you.
Thanks, Vice Mayor. Emily, Bruce, educate me on the storm water management and how that's different from drainage. I know we have some public hearings coming up about a storm water management plan, and then we have items here with deal with drainage. What's the difference on that?
Sure. There are some cities that actually charge a fee for stormwater drainage. We don't do that in Little Rock. We're not necessarily proposing that, but we need to update the manual because it's really, that part is almost regulated by the federal government. So that's really the purpose of the meetings that we're hosting this in the next few days.
Okay, so it has nothing to do with...
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Director Phillips?
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Couple questions. Want to follow up on Director Campuros' question, because I had a concern about that as well. And I guess my thought would be, if there's a plan in place, why can't we just go ahead and do those things now? Why would we wait and to see if something happened? Why wouldn't we just get to work on those things ASAP?
Director Phillips, because you all have allocated dollars for these projects, again, we're monitoring it. It would be very quickly an effort to be able to sustain those dollars. And obviously, if the talks, I think, they're ongoing, but if it looks like they're not going to, if that's part of it, and that's just one of the components, I think, that the parties are talking about. But I feel very confident we would move very quickly to be able to maintain our funding. But instead of taking it from the projects right now, we wanted to just continue to monitor, work with our federal partners And I think we can pull the trigger pretty quick.
Okay, and I understand that. I guess my suggestion or request to y'all when y'all thinking about this is if there's ways for us to expedite any of these things so we won't have to move quickly on 20 things, we only have to move quickly on 3 because we've already done 17, I would say let's go ahead and avoid that potential and get the money to our residents as soon as possible. And then secondly, I think last week or a couple weeks ago, we passed an ordinance approving some sidewalks. And then I understand there are sidewalks here, and I understand that sidewalk was related to bond funding, correct?
Correct.
And what we're talking about, what Director Cox just talked about today was sidewalks from the ARPA funding. From a efficiency standpoint, why didn't we just have one big list and then kind of divvy it up under which category it could be funded by? I don't understand the reason why we didn't already have that done. Is there a reason? That's what I'm getting at. Is there a reason we didn't do it that way? Is there something that I need to be educated on?
I believe, I think it was maybe Director Richardson or someone asked about the list, and I know we sent that out. But we typically have so many requests for sidewalks. And so we actually spend some general fund, street fund money to do rehab of sidewalks, mainly in wards 1 and 2. So there's no rhyme or reason as far as why it was separated, but I think John and his staff wanted to go ahead and get that list going because, again, we're still working on requests from 5 years ago almost. So this is just additional money that will help go toward that process.
Okay, I understood. And I guess the second request, and then I'll be quiet, Vice Mayor. Going forward, I think that may be something to do so we can move quicker. I mean, I understand that there are allocated dollars from different pots of money, but if there's one category of projects, I know there are multiple lists of things that our citizens have requested from us from years and decades. But just from an efficiency standpoint, it seems like we can just take that list and say 1 through 10 is bond money, 11 through 20 is ARPA money, and then allow us to act even quicker on behalf of the citizens. So those are my suggestions. Thank you, Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Director Phillips. Director Richardson and Director Adcock.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I just want to piggyback Director Miller's question. And Bruce, this may be a question for you, a process question for you or Emily, and a legal question for you, Tom. When we talked about the drainage projects as targeted community development, and we had wards 1, 2, 6, or 7, or small portion of Ward 3. And I don't want to play ward politics, but in that resolution that was sponsored and passed, there was no reference to Ward 3 at all in that as targeted development. And should we, in fact, work with neighborhood groups or planning association, neighborhood associations to get them to start looking at some proposed target development projects based on what it is we're proposing as we move forward with these ARPA funds. So that process question, Bruce, we didn't make reference to Ward 3 in that resolution, and we're listing it.
Yep, and the reason, and I don't know if we feel like we need to go back and amend the resolution, but as you know, when we redrew the boundaries, that portion came into Ward 3. So that's why we listed it that way. I didn't feel the need to revise the resolution because you all adopted the boundaries and those areas were designated.
I agree, and I'm okay with amending the resolution because I understand what you're saying about when we redrew the boundaries and a portion of Ward 3 took up some of those areas, I think, that we utilize for the drafting of this resolution with respect to targeted redevelopment and targeted investment in marginalized parts of our city that need that kind of extra little to kind of get them going and get that whole community going, that part of our city going. So I'm not adverse, Mr. Moore, to amending that to reflect what's said here, but I want to make sure that we're all singing from the same hymnal and we don't have one thing here and have something totally different in a resolution that we passed last year or a year before last, whenever we passed it.
And Tom, I don't know if you think we need to amend that. Like I said, the board adopted unanimously the boundaries, and so that's why Ward 3 is added.
Yeah, I'm just going to look at it. I mean, we've got it adopted. We've got two things that talk about what it is. I don't know that we've got the type of conflict that we need to do something about, but I'll look at it.
That's all I have, Vice Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Adcock?
Yes, on page 5, on the, next to the last, is there some reason that Ward 5 was left out of this? Every ward was listed except Ward 5.
Those were where the vaccine clinics occurred.
Didn't have COVID in Ward 5.
So we had no vaccine clinic or nothing in Ward 5?
It was a joke.
I suppose not. I can go back and double check the records, but I recall that's how
Well, I hate for Ward 5 to be left out. Okay, on page 7.
Yes, ma'am.
I have for years begged for money for Whitstone Boys and Girls Club and always told that we could not spend city funds on a Boys and Girls Club. Was this $200,000 put out to bid to all the Boys and Girls Clubs?
There was a bid, yes, ma'am.
Ma'am?
Yes.
It was
I mean, it
put
was
out to
a
bid
public
for
bid.
all the Boys and Girls Club?
For recreational facilities, yes.
Okay, I would like to see that because
Okay.
we have been raising money for Whitstone, and I can't believe that Cindy did not apply for any of these funds for any of the Boys and Girls Club except Thrasher. Do you know what this is going to do at Thrasher?
I don't have the details, but I'll get that for you.
Okay, I'd like to see the details. I'd like to see the proposal that went out and then also the responses.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Director Miller?
Yes, thanks, Vice Mayor. There's one other question. The senior citizen at $3 million. Of course, this building is a senior center, right? Center, what did I say? So what, is this a new center that we're talking about?
So, Director Miller, I think you're sort of referring to the Adult Leisure Center that was here and it burned, and we used some insurance money and sales tax money to build it. And it's a great facility. It had a terrible name. And so we did come up with the center at University Park. But this is not just a senior center. This is a facility for all citizens to use. I don't foresee children coming here, but so the senior center that we're proposing will be attached to this facility, and we'll have the water feature and everything, but this part of the facility will still be open to the public.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Assistant Manager Cox. I don't see any additional questions, but we do have a card for citizen communication. Janice Mosby. Ms. Mosby,
I think she left out, or she's either in the viewing room, Ashley.
Vice Mayor, she needed some assistance from the Office of Executive Administration, and she met with someone before, so I think she's already left.
Okay. Thank you, Director Phillips.
No problem.
Does anyone else on the board have anything to bring forward?
I have
If not,
one thing,
okay.
Vice Mayor, and apparently there are other one things. I just want to make an announcement to the public who are watching. A couple weeks ago, we had what was the beginning of a discussion as it relates to what the city can do to improve our protection for our residents or tenants in some of our apartment complexes throughout the city. And I've been informed by city staff that next Tuesday, May 23rd, during our 4 o'clock meeting, we'll have a policy discussion on those issues to discuss what we can do to add better protection. So I want to make that clear to the public. I know some people are here because of that, so I want to make sure that they are aware that next Tuesday at 4 o'clock, we will be having that discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Director Adcock and Director Campuris.
I just wanted to check with Mr. Carpenter on our meeting with the Metropolitan Housing Commissioners. Do you have any update on that, please?
I haven't set up a meeting or invited them. I was going to work with Mr. Moore on that date, but you also gave me a pretty heavy research assignment too, and that's not completed yet.
Okay, thank you.
Director.
And we did have a meeting last night on STRs. 5 of the directors attended that meeting, and we may want an update from Mr. Collins on that at some point.
And I watched it, Director Adcock, all 1 hour and 46 minutes of it.
Good.
I watched it.
People was wondering where you was.
I was watching it and looking and listening and learning and sometimes laughing. But it was a good meeting, I thought, a good representation of our community. And I thought Mr. Collins did a wonderful job of explaining the process, explaining the issues and answering some questions, and then listening to some comments. We had probably more comments, far more comments and recommendations about the ordinance than we did questions about the ordinance from what I saw during the hours and 46 minutes I watched it.
Thank you, Director Campuris.
Mr. Moore.
Yes.
The Cappy has told me about the looting in some of the areas that she represents, and I've got one family that's had some problems over there too. And is there any way that we can use some of our either ARPA money or anything else or FEMA money to at nighttime put guards up or put somebody up so that people can't get in there and steal the few possessions that people still have? It's just, it is, I know the chief wants to put cameras up, but that's after the fact, and I'm not sure you can get enough license plates to make a difference. But if all of a sudden we put out that at 8 o'clock or whenever the sun goes down till sunrise, you have to have a license to get into that area. Yeah, I think it would give the people there some reassurance that we're trying to help take care of that area, and hopefully would keep the looting down.
I'll review. I'm not sure we can use those funding sources, but we'll see what we can do to provide some additional staffing out there
Okay.
during the evening.
I think the chief is doing a great job, but it's hard to have someone to dedicate that many people there all the time, and I don't think you need an officer, a sworn officer to really do that, and we maybe figure out some way to do it for the time being. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Campuris. Director Miller.
Yes, just one quick question. I'd given the city manager heads up on this, so it's not going to catch him by surprise. Can you give us a timetable on when we might expect to get to City Hall? I know Director Lewis and I have never had a board meeting there. And I also...
Me either, Director Miller.
Oh, you had neither, Director Phillips? Oh, and so that, and then I want to be able to respond to some adults or people who want to use the leisure center when they might expect to get this facility back and get us out of here.
Yes, sir. Remember, it's not called the Leisure Center anymore, though. But
What's it called now? I'm sorry.
the center at University Park.
I'm going to have to repeat that 10 times, and I'll get it. Okay. All right. Thank you.
We signed a contract recently with Hotco Construction. It's a 90-day contract. Next time you're at City Hall, well, you can't get in there right now, but because we did find some asbestos in the flooring. So we're on a sort of 2-week asbestos removal process, which should occur. The actual process should occur this weekend. And then they feel they've really, I go by there every day, they've really done a lot of work, and it was pretty much cleared out, and that's how they found the towel. So, you know, this summer for sure, with construction and all, sometimes it's hard to predict, but they have a 90-day contract to get it done, and they feel very confident they'll get it done.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. Director Adcock, is this an additional one, or?
No, mine's down.
Thank you. I just want to make sure. Director Peck?
Thank you. I'll just follow up on what Dr. Kapiris was talking about. And I have been in, excuse me, in communication with City Manager Moore and Chief Helton and the mayor about the problems with looting in the affected areas. There was a little delay with the cameras. A little technical difficulty, but I think they're going to be installed this weekend. I've had an update from Entergy. A big problem is that these neighborhoods aren't lit. So it's pitch dark, and so it's difficult. Some of the other problems have to do with the debris that still needs to be picked up, water lines damaged. I mean, I know we're doing the best we can. I mean, believe me, I get phone calls every single day about something new that's been stolen. And Chief Helton did tell me today that this is going to be an ongoing problem, especially when construction starts again. You know, if a thief's out there, it doesn't matter if it's the tornado or they're building houses looking for copper. It's just, I'm very concerned about it. I think it's going to be going on for the next several months. And it's very hard to know how to respond to people who have been displaced. They're not living in their home right now. An example, the young firefighter that I bragged out about a couple of times, he reached out to me, he said, yeah, we're not staying there. Our washer and dryer were fine, but somebody came in and stole our washer and dryer. So it's just, I don't know what the solution is, but I have been talking almost daily to Bruce and the chief and the mayor, and I kind of like your idea, the barricades, but they've got cops on bikes. They have vehicles going through there day and night. It's just, I don't know how, it seems to be insurmountable. So I don't know what to do. I do like the idea of the Visa gift cards. I think that would be very helpful. I don't know how we would choose and disperse those, but there are a lot of folks out there that need our help. Thank you.
Thank you. And if we could get some follow-up on that maybe next week. Director Richardson is.
And I just wanted to dovetail on that. That was a great point. And I think that Bruce, since our partnership with the Arkansas State Police this weekend has resulted in, according to their numbers or according to a news source, 610 arrests patrolling streets in Pulaski County. It may be a way for us to utilize our partnership with them. But to that end, Bruce, I don't know, or Tom, I would like to have, with respect to those 610 arrests, the gender, race, and location of those who were arrested and the offensive. I'm not sure there were 610 felonies, but it may be a way for us to utilize our partnership with them to have them patrol those streets. I know I saw a couple of cars pulled over on Asher and Mapleville Pike by Arkansas State Police and 57th Street by Arkansas State Police this past weekend. And apparently there was a story on one of our local news outlets who talked about that number, 610 arrests. And it may be a way for us to look at utilizing our partnership with them, Director Pack, to help impact those areas of concern we have out there. I don't know how we're limited, Bruce, and I can tell you when we turn these mics off where you can find that story about the 610.
Thank you, Director Richardson. Seeing no other hands, do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So move.
Second. There's a motion, a second, to adjourn the meeting. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The meeting is adjourned.